Pfizer and BioNTech are suggesting a third shot of their coronavirus vaccine is needed to fully protect against the Omicron variant. The drug maker conducted a study on the strain as it continues to spread across the country. At least 20 states have reported cases of Omicron since it was first detected in the U.S. last week. Pfizer and BioNTech said it studied blood from individuals who received 2 doses of the vaccine, and it is, quote, significantly less effective at blocking the virus as opposed to 3 doses. CBS News' Natalie Brand has more.
Pfizer released new data showing a booster shot of its vaccine provides significantly more protection against Omicron compared to the initial 2-dose regimen.
If you get the booster, you're really in good shape. And so that's very encouraging news. That's the lab report. There's more study going on.
Doctors believe Omicron could be the dominant strain in the U.S. by January. So far, the data suggests the new variant may trigger less severe cases than Delta, but could be much easier to spread.
So if it's half as aggressive and twice as contagious, that means that you're going to get significant numbers of hospitalizations.
News of the new variant has led to a rise in people getting booster doses as well as first-time vaccinations. Here on Capitol Hill, a group of lawmakers is pushing for a vote to try and block a Biden administration rule that would require millions of American employees to get vaccinated or take weekly COVID tests.
As soon as today, our Republican friends are going to come to the floor to push an anti-science, anti-vaccine proposal to overturn the president's vaccine requirements for businesses with more than 100 employees.
At least 2 Democrats support the Republican measure, giving it a majority of support in the Senate.
They don't trust individuals, families, doctors, employers, and customers to sort things out for themselves.
But the move is largely symbolic since it's not expected to get a vote in the House, and the requirement is facing challenges in the courts. Natalie Brandt, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
And for more on this, I want to bring in John Moore. He's a professor of microbiology and immunology at Weill Cornell Medical College. Professor Moore, welcome. So, as we've been mentioning, Pfizer and some other researchers are saying a third dose is needed to neutralize the Omicron variant, that 2 doses are not quite as effective. Do we know how much less effective 2 doses are as opposed to a third dose?
Well, you can't judge from studies how vaccines are going to hold up in the real world. They're going to give us clues, and there are actually 3 studies overnight that all report that Omicron is pretty resistant to vaccine and infection-induced antibodies. Studies vary in the numbers, but they all give the same pattern. And the Pfizer press release certainly says that the third dose will increase the antibody level enough to restore at least some of the protection. But I don't think people need to be freaking out about the consequence of Omicron breaking through vaccine protection at this stage. I mean, the key metric, which we haven't yet seen and may not see, is if a large number of vaccinated people end up in hospital. That's not being seen so far, and it's not being seen abroad. And that is the most encouraging sign to date, that it seems to be causing relatively mild infections. That has to be confirmed over the next few weeks, but I think it's the most encouraging bit of information we've had on Omicron so far.
That is encouraging, Professor. I want to ask you, though, about what happened last week. A Pfizer chairman, the CEO of BioNTech, and a few others began suggesting that perhaps an adapted Omicron-specific version of the vaccine may be needed. What do you think about that? They said this new vaccine might be ready as early as March. Do you have any idea of the likelihood that this will need to happen?
Well, it's appropriate to plan for this eventuality. I mean, they did the same with the Beta variant that never took off in the States and the Delta variant, which dominates the American pandemic and, in fact, the global pandemic. But those variant-specific vaccine redesigns were never rolled out because they were judged to be not necessary, that any extra protection they gave was not it was not sufficient, it was not important enough to justify the expense of making a new vaccine and rolling it out. Now, that may change with Omicron. We'll know more in the next several weeks. And as the company executives have said, a new variant vaccine wouldn't be available until March anyway, because it takes time to produce it, get it approved, and get it rolled out. So at the moment, it's a moot point, and we shouldn't be factoring any decisions into whether or not we're going to need a future different vaccine. We have to deal with what we've got and use them the most appropriately.
But so here's a question for you. Let's say you've had your 2 shots and you're, weighing, should I get my 3rd booster or should I wait until March to see if I need to get one of these Omicron-specific boosters? Or if you already have your 3rd, could you go ahead and get the 4th, right?
I would get the 3rd dose now. I wouldn't be waiting until March. That's a long time to wait. That's 3 months away. We don't know if there's going to be an Omicron-specific variant booster. The immediacy is now. Remember that Delta is 99% of American infections. That's the pandemic. So anything that happens with Omicron at the moment is small potatoes. Now, maybe that will change in the coming weeks, but at the moment, the risk is Delta. Mm-hmm. So waiting just doesn't make sense. And it's ill-advised to have too many doses in too short a space of time. I mean, it's not the right way to deliver vaccines. So you shouldn't get, hypothetically, a 3rd dose of a vaccine in February and then a few weeks later get a 4th dose of a different vaccine. I mean, we need time to scheme this out, to understand what's going on, to make rational decisions rather than anything that's driven by public panic.
Right. And Professor, we have heard now from Pfizer saying that it believes its 3rd dose is more effective than just 2 doses against the Omicron. But is there any indication that we can expect the same sort of effectiveness from a Moderna boost and a J&J boost?
Well, I think with Moderna, we're going to see the same pattern of data because although the 2 vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, are not identical, they're sufficiently similar that one data set has always been translatable to the other throughout the vaccine era of the pandemic. J&J is a bit more problematic. It's a weaker antibody response, and it would be more affected by Omicron, we would predict. But the recommendation already has been for several weeks now that people who got a J&J vaccine should get an mRNA vaccine or a second J&J, but an mRNA would be better. Mm-hmm. So nothing changes in that regard. I mean, people shouldn't be relying only on one J&J dose at this stage of the pandemic because we've known for many weeks that an additional dose is important. And the evidence is that an mRNA boost for J&J is the strongest way to go.
Right, but let me ask you, Professor Moore, if that then becomes your J&J 2nd dose, so to speak, even though it's an mRNA, then do you still need a booster 6 months out from that 2nd dose?
That's not clear. At the moment, the recommendation is that you get a 2nd vaccine dose if you're immunized originally with J&J. And that should be sufficient for a significant period of time. Now, whether a 3rd dose is going to be necessary in, say, 6 months' time is something that's going to have to be figured out over the next 6 months. But the recommendation is for a booster dose to J&J, and that's the right thing to do.
All right, Professor John Moore, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.